By April 1945, Berlin was no longer a capital. It was a graveyard waiting to be filled. The Third Reich, once projected as a 1,000-year empire, had been reduced to rubble, hunger, and fear. The Red Army was closing in from the east like an unstoppable force of vengeance, while the Western Allies pressed from the west. Knowing the war was nearly over. Inside Berlin, reality collapsed faster than the buildings. Hitler's promises meant nothing. The myth of invincibility was dead. What remained was a city of civilians, exhausted soldiers, and children ordered to die for a cause already lost. The streets were flooded with refugees fleeing the Soviet advance. Women, elderly men, and wounded veterans dragged what little they owned through shattered neighborhoods as artillery thundered closer each hour. Food had disappeared. Water was contaminated. Electricity failed nightly. The smell of smoke, decay, and fear filled the air. Berlin had become a trapped animal. Hitler refused to flee. He sealed himself underground in the Führerbunker, a concrete tomb beneath the chancellery, surrounded by loyalists, maps, and delusions. There, he still imagined phantom armies marching to his rescue. Generals lied to him, afraid to speak the truth. Others had already accepted the end and were simply waiting to survive it. The German army defending Berlin was no longer an army. It was a collection of shattered units, teenage boys from the Hitler Youth, elderly men from the Volkssturm, wounded soldiers pulled back from hospitals, all armed with outdated weapons and false hope. They were told Berlin was the final stand. That surrender meant annihilation. That death was preferable to capture. The Soviet advance was fueled by rage. They had seen their villages burned, their families slaughtered, their cities erased. They were not marching toward Berlin for negotiation. They were coming for revenge. Stalin demanded the city at all costs. The race for Berlin became a political and psychological war. The Red Army attacked relentlessly, artillery flattening entire districts before infantry even advanced. Buildings collapsed like paper. The ground shook constantly. Berliners learned to distinguish between the sound of German shells leaving and Soviet shells arriving. The difference meant life or death. The once grand avenues became kill zones. Snipers ruled the ruins. Every window was a threat. Every basement could hide death. The battle erased the concept of a front line. Combat happened floor by floor, room by room, staircase by staircase. Soldiers fought in darkness, choking on dust and smoke, stabbing and shooting at silhouettes meters away. The city devoured men indiscriminately. Civilians were trapped between collapsing buildings and advancing armies. Many hid in cellars for days without food or light, listening to explosions above and screams echo through the underground. Suicides became common. Entire families chose death rather than face what they feared was coming. Propaganda had painted the Soviets as monsters. And while reality was complex, fear ruled every decision. In the Führerbunker, Hitler grew detached from reality. He blamed betrayal, weakness, and imaginary enemies. He decorated teenage soldiers for bravery while knowing the war was over. Eva Braun remained beside him, loyal to the end, isolated from the destruction above. The bunker became a place of denial, sealed off from the screams of Berlin. As Soviet forces crossed the Oder River and encircled the city, escape routes vanished. The last planes flew out carrying officials and documents. Some tried to flee on foot, only to be cut down or captured. The ring tightened. Artillery fire became constant, day and night. The ground never stopped shaking. Berlin was being crushed deliberately, methodically. The collapse of the Third Reich was no longer a future event. It was happening in real time, measured in hours, not days. This was not just the fall of a city. It was the violent death of an ideology built on conquest, terror, and lies. And Berlin would pay the final price. When the Red Army finally broke through Berlin's outer defenses, the city descended into absolute chaos. The Soviet assault was not a single strike but a relentless wave. Artillery fire preceded every advance, reducing entire blocks to dust before infantry moved in. Katyusha rockets screamed through the sky, their sound alone enough to break morale. Buildings that had survived years of war vanished in seconds. Streets became rivers of debris, tangled with tram lines, shattered glass, and bodies. The defenders were overwhelmed not only by numbers, but by exhaustion. They had no reserves. No air support. No hope. Yet orders from above remained unchanged. Berlin was to be held at all costs. For the Soviet soldiers, Berlin represented the heart of the enemy. Many had marched thousands of kilometers to reach it. They had seen mass graves, burned villages, starving children. They carried rage as much as rifles. This was not just a military operation. It was personal. The fighting inside Berlin was brutal beyond description. Tanks fired point blank into apartment buildings. Infantry followed closely, clearing rooms with grenades and automatic fire. Every building became a fortress. Every cellar a last stand. German defenders used Panzerfaust to ambush tanks from rubble piles, destroying armor at close range before being crushed by return fire. Casualties were staggering on both sides. The city consumed lives at an industrial scale. Civilians suffered the most. With no clear front lines, death came without warning. Artillery shells tore through shelters. Soldiers burst into basements searching for snipers or hiding enemies. Fear dominated every moment. Women and children hid in darkness, praying the walls would hold. Some emerged after days to find entire streets erased. The psychological collapse of Berlin was complete. Law and order vanished. Police units disintegrated. Fire brigades ceased to function. The city burned unchecked. Water mains were destroyed, making firefighting impossible. Fires spread freely, turning nights into glowing infernos that illuminated the ruins for kilometers. Inside the German command structure, communication failed. Orders arrived too late or not at all. Commanders led units that no longer existed. Maps were useless as landmarks disappeared. The battlefield changed hourly. Soviet forces adapted quickly. They used storm groups. Fire brigades ceased to function. The city burned unchecked. Water mains were destroyed, making firefighting impossible. Fires spread freely, turning nights into glowing infernos that illuminated the ruins for kilometers. Inside the German command structure, communication failed. Orders arrived too late or not at all. Commanders led units that no longer existed. Maps were useless as landmarks disappeared. The battlefield changed hourly. Soviet forces adapted quickly. They used storm groups, small, aggressive units trained specifically for urban combat. They moved through sewers, smashed through walls, bypassed strongpoints, and isolated defenders before destroying them. This methodical destruction left no escape. The myth of German discipline collapsed. Many defenders fought bravely, but bravery could not compensate for reality. Some deserted. Some surrendered. Others fought to the death because surrender felt impossible. Propaganda had done its work. The fear of Soviet captivity was greater than fear of death. As the Red Army advanced deeper, symbols of Nazi power fell. The Reichstag loomed ahead, not yet captured but already surrounded by destruction. It had no real military value, but immense symbolic importance. Stalin wanted it taken. It represented the end. The closer Soviet forces came to the city center, the more desperate the German resistance became. Hitler Youth units were thrown into combat with minimal training. Armed with Panzerfausts and rifles, boys barely old enough to shave were ordered to stop tanks. Many died within minutes. Their deaths changed nothing. In the bunkers and underground shelters, civilians listened as the sounds of battle drew closer. Footsteps overhead. Explosions shaking ceilings. Screams echoing through corridors. The city's underground became a maze of fear, filled with refugees, wounded soldiers, and the dying. The line between combatant and civilian dissolved completely. Berlin was no longer a city. It was a battlefield with walls. As Soviet artillery closed in on the government district, the end was undeniable. The Reich was collapsing not in distant fields, but in its own capital. The world that Nazism had built was being destroyed brick by brick, street by street, body by body. And the men still issuing orders knew it. They were simply choosing how many would die before it ended. As Berlin burned above, the Führer bunker sank deeper into isolation. It was no longer a command center. It was a sealed world of denial beneath collapsing ruins. Thick concrete walls muffled the artillery, but could not silence reality. The air inside was stale, heavy with smoke, sweat, and despair. Generators failed intermittently. Lights flickered. Maps on the walls were meaningless now, their arrows and unit symbols representing forces that no longer existed. Hitler spent his days hunched over tables, issuing orders to phantom divisions, convinced that loyalty and willpower could still reverse fate. His generals no longer argued. Some nodded silently. Others avoided his gaze. They understood the truth but feared speaking it. The Reich had already died. The bunker was merely waiting for the body to stop moving. Above ground, Soviet forces tightened their grip on central Berlin. The government district was encircled. Artillery pounded relentlessly, turning ministries, monuments, and embassies into rubble. The city's symbols of power collapsed one after another. For Soviet soldiers, this was the climax of years of suffering. The closer they moved toward the center, the more vicious the fighting became. German defenders launched desperate counterattacks, often at night, attempting to break encirclement or delay the inevitable. These assaults achieved nothing except more deaths. The Red Army responded with overwhelming force, crushing resistance wherever it appeared. The streets around the Reichstag became killing grounds. Machine guns swept intersections. Tanks fired directly into buildings. Snipers hunted from shattered windows. The air was thick with dust and smoke, visibility reduced to meters. Corpses piled in stairwells and courtyards, left where they fell because retrieval was impossible. Inside the bunker, Hitler's mental and physical condition deteriorated rapidly. He raged against imagined traitors. He accused the German people of weakness, claiming they had failed him. Not the other way around. He still refused evacuation, insisting that Berlin would be his final stand. Eva Braun remained with him, detached from the chaos above, clinging to a sense of loyalty that defied reason. Others in the bunker began planning escape. Some attempted to flee through the city's underground tunnels under cover of darkness. Many were captured or killed. The bunker's population shrank daily. In meetings, voices lowered. Maps stopped being updated. The silence grew longer. The end approached slowly, then suddenly. On April 30, 1945, with Soviet troops only hundreds of meters away, Hitler accepted what he had denied for years. There would be no rescue. No reversal. No miracle. The war was lost. In a small room beneath the ruins of Berlin, he ended his life alongside Eva Braun. The man who had dragged Europe into catastrophe died unseen, unheard, while his capital burned. His body was burned hastily in the garden above, as shells landed nearby. The Reich did not mourn. There was no ceremony. No honor. Only chaos. News of Hitler's death spread quickly through the bunker and beyond. For some, it was relief. For others, disbelief. For many soldiers still fighting above, it changed nothing. The orders remained. Surrender was still forbidden. Resistance continued even as the leadership vanished. The ideology outlived its creator, demanding sacrifice until the final breath. Above ground, Soviet forces stormed the Reichstag. The building became a symbol not of governance, but of annihilation. The battle for it was savage, fought room by room, staircase by staircase, in near darkness. German defenders fought until ammunition ran out or positions collapsed. The Red Army raised its flag amid the ruins, an image that would define the end of the war in Europe. But that moment did not bring peace. The fighting continued elsewhere in the city for days. Civilians remained trapped. Soldiers continued to die for streets that no longer mattered. Berlin was a corpse being dissected. In the hours following Hitler's death, the bunker emptied rapidly. Some officers attempted to negotiate surrender. Others chose suicide rather than capture. The final illusion of unity shattered completely. The Third Reich, which had promised eternal dominance, ended not with victory or defiance, but with exhaustion, fear, and self-destruction. The bunker stood as its final monument. A concrete grave for an ideology that had consumed millions and left nothing but ruins behind. When the final pockets of resistance in Berlin collapsed, the city did not celebrate. There was no moment of relief. No sudden peace. Only silence layered over destruction. The guns slowly fell quiet, but the echoes of battle lingered in the ruins like a ghost. Berlin was unrecognizable. Streets that had once symbolized power and order were reduced to fields of broken stone, twisted metal, and burned out shells of buildings. The air was thick with smoke and decay. Fires still burned unattended. Corpses lay where they had fallen, soldiers and civilians indistinguishable beneath dust and blood. The battle was over, but survival had only begun. For the civilians who emerged from cellars and bunkers, the world above felt alien. They stepped into daylight after weeks underground, blinking at a city erased. Food was almost non-existent. Water had to be scavenged from broken pipes or collected from rivers contaminated by debris and bodies. Disease spread quickly. With no functioning administration, no police, no infrastructure, Berlin existed in a vacuum. The old order was gone, and nothing had replaced it yet. Soviet soldiers occupied the city in massive numbers. For many, the war was finally finished. For others, it continued in different forms. Discipline varied widely. Some units maintained order. Others acted with brutality, driven by years of rage and trauma. The civilian population lived in constant fear, unsure what the next hour would bring. The collapse of the Reich had left them exposed, defenseless, and blamed for a war they could no longer influence. Meanwhile, surviving German officers attempted to negotiate surrender terms. Sporadic fighting continued in isolated areas as communication failures left units unaware that the war was effectively over. On May 2, 1945, Berlin officially surrendered. The fighting stopped not because of strategy or victory, but because there was nothing left to fight with. The Third Reich had burned through its final reserves of men, weapons, and belief. In the days that followed, the full scale of destruction became visible. Hospitals overflowed with wounded. Cemeteries could not keep pace with the dead. Mass graves were dug quickly, without names or markers. The once proud capital of Germany had become a humanitarian disaster zone. For the Red Army, victory came at a staggering cost. Tens of thousands had died in the final assault alone. Many soldiers wandered the ruins in silence, exhausted beyond celebration. The triumph they had been promised felt hollow after so much bloodshed. For them, Berlin was not just a conquered city. It was the endpoint of unimaginable suffering that had begun years earlier on their own soil. Far beyond Berlin, news of the city's fall confirmed what the world already knew. The war in Europe was over. The Third Reich no longer existed. Its leaders were dead, captured, or fleeing. The empire that had sought to dominate a continent collapsed in ruins, leaving behind questions that would haunt generations. How had it come to this? How had an entire nation been consumed by ideology? How many warnings had been ignored? In Berlin, answers were irrelevant. Survival was the only priority. The city would take decades to rebuild, not just physically, but morally and psychologically. The scars left by April and May of 1945 would never fully heal. Berlin became a symbol not of defeat alone, but of consequence. A reminder of where fanaticism, unchecked power, and blind obedience ultimately lead. The silence that followed the fall of Berlin was not peace. It was exhaustion. It was mourning. It was the sound of an era ending in ashes. The Third Reich did not fall in a single moment. It collapsed slowly, painfully, dragging an entire city down with it. And when it was finally over, Berlin stood as a warning carved into history. A city that witnessed the death of an empire and paid the price in full.